Human predators walk among us. Psychopaths are predators in human form. They use coercion, manipulation, lies, deceit, theft, violence, and even murder, without a trace of guilt or remorse. Leading expert on psychopathy, Dr. Robert Hare, estimates that about 1% of the population displays psychopathic traits, while clinical psychologist Dr. Martha Stout believes the number may be closer to 4%. Scientific studies show that psychopaths are disproportionately represented in top leadership positions, executives, politicians, and others who wield power over people. That's why understanding the psychology of psychopaths is not just a matter of personal safety, but one of public sanity. Knowing their nature can protect us, our loved ones, and society as a whole from their destructive impact. As Robert Hare said, compared to other mental disorders, psychopathy is vastly under-researched, despite being responsible for more suffering and destruction in society than all other disorders combined. Psychopaths exist in every social class. It's highly likely that at some point in your life you'll encounter one, and that interaction will be painful or humiliating. Your best defense is knowledge. When we hear the word psychopath, we tend to picture violent serial killers, but that image represents only the extreme end of the spectrum. Most psychopaths operate with quiet sophistication. They destroy from within, tearing apart families, manipulating co-workers, exploiting the trust of loved ones, all while staying outside the reach of justice. Most people either don't know what psychopathy is, or associate it solely with convicted criminals behind bars. But the truth is, most psychopaths are not imprisoned. They walk among us, neighbors, bosses, partners. What stops the average person from harming others? Conscience. We can empathize. When we hurt someone, we feel guilt. Psychopaths lack that inner mechanism entirely. Their emotional world is flat. They cannot love, form genuine friendships, or build deep human connections. To them, people are not individuals. They're resources, objects, tools to achieve personal gain. Even seasoned professionals are baffled by a psychopath's cold indifference to horrific events, or the casual way they describe brutal acts, as if they were peeling an apple or gutting a fish. A psychopath is a cold, egocentric, conscience-free individual incapable of empathy or emotional intimacy. They are unbound by the moral restraints that guide normal human behavior. And it's those very qualities, empathy, conscience, compassion, that form the foundation of social harmony. While normal people seek love, understanding, and emotional closeness, the psychopath is driven by one thing: the pursuit of pleasure and stimulation. This drive often manifests as excessive alcohol and drug use, impulsive sexual behavior, and a craving for danger and risk. But their highest and most intoxicating sensation is power. Regardless of profession or status, be it a criminal, unemployed person, office manager, corporate executive, politician, or bureaucrat, a psychopath is obsessed with dominating and controlling others. The reward may vary, from a free lunch to global domination, but the core is always the same: control, forcing submission, winning. In Robert Hare's book, he includes a psychological profile of a psychopath named Earl. Earl's most striking trait was his obsession with total power. People only mattered to him if they submitted or could be forced, manipulated, or tricked into doing what he wanted. He constantly assessed how to extract benefit from others and situations. Psychopathy, from a mental health perspective, is a severe disorder, but psychopaths themselves often view their condition not as a flaw, but as an advantage. The lack of empathy, guilt, or emotional attachment, these to them are tools that grant a ruthless edge in a survival of the fittest world. That's why efforts to rehabilitate psychopaths are so futile. They don't see themselves as sick. They don't want to change. Summarizing decades of research on the so-called treatment of psychopathy, Hare writes, "The shortest chapter in any book about psychopathy is the one on treatment. It usually amounts to a single sentence: there is no effective treatment. To make matters worse, psychopaths are extremely difficult to detect, even though their internal nature is the polar opposite of humanity, like night versus day. They often present as calm, even charming individuals. 20th century psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley called this the mask of sanity, a carefully crafted persona that conceals a predatory and merciless mind. A psychopath is like a predator who has learned to mimic its prey. They copy the emotions, behaviors, and speech of others, creating the illusion of normalcy until it's too late. Psychologist Daniel Jones, in his work The Snake in the Grass, offers a powerful analogy. In Australia, there are spiders that look and move like ants. Some are so convincing that the ants allow the spider to live among them. Then the spider begins feeding on its new friends, not all at once, but slowly and discreetly. Like these spiders, psychopaths in society are expert at blending in. In fact, they often appear more attractive than average, charming, confident, magnetic. Partly, this is because they experience far less anxiety and fear than most people. But more importantly, it's due to their exceptional talent for lying. They distort facts about themselves, their past, achievements, and intentions with ease and precision. Their lies don't just sound plausible, they often hypnotize, disorient, disarm. On a subconscious level, they gain control. Martha Stout once said, "Most of the victims I've worked with said they were absolutely enchanted at first. Their involvement with a psychopath and their refusal to walk away despite the pain was directly tied to how charming the person appeared. Again and again, I've heard phrases like, 'He was the most charming man I ever met. It felt like I'd known her my whole life. He had this energy like no one else.' But even the most masterful mask eventually cracks. One of the most glaring tells is pathological grandiosity, a bloated, exaggerated self-image that the psychopath simply can't hide. They have a narcissistic and inflated sense of self-importance, extreme egocentrism, and a belief in their own exceptionality. They see themselves as the center of the universe, superior beings with the right to make their own rules. Sometimes it's the eyes that give them away. Many victims describe a psychopath's eyes as reptilian, devoid of emotion, cold, piercing, and unsettling. No matter the context, their gaze remains unchanged. There's no reflection of empathy or humanity. It's this eerie similarity to the eyes of predatory reptiles that inspired modern myths about reptilians among us. Some people feel immediate discomfort when looking into a psychopath's eyes, as if a predator has locked onto them. Others fall under a hypnotic influence. They sense danger but can't identify the source, becoming controlled without realizing the manipulation. Whatever the mechanism, one thing is clear: a psychopath's gaze is a tool of power, used to dominate, suppress, and control. Another way to spot a psychopath is by listening to how they speak. Their speech often lacks coherence, filled with contradictions, illogical leaps, and odd tangents. They may switch topics for no reason, or dodge direct questions with vague or irrelevant answers. They are infamous for responding to questions that weren't asked, or giving answers that have nothing to do with the issue at hand. Additionally, their speech is often accompanied by exaggerated gestures. Researchers believe this may reflect a brain difference, difficulty integrating emotional, logical, and linguistic centers. But the gestures also serve a manipulative function. They distract the listener, making it harder to catch logical gaps and lies. Robert Hare once noted, "One of the psychopaths we studied delivered his stories with wide gestures and theatrical facial expressions. It was less of an interview and more of a performance. Our specialist was so mesmerized by the form, he missed the glaring contradictions in the content." The origins of psychopathy are not fully understood, but modern science increasingly leans toward the view that psychopathy is innate, a biological predisposition rather than the result of childhood trauma. In other words, psychopathy is more likely to be inborn than acquired. To date, There is no substantial body of evidence linking psychopathy's core trait, lack of conscience, to abuse or violence in childhood. In fact, psychopaths appear to be less affected by early life experiences than ordinary people. While psychopaths have existed throughout human history, the modern world offers more fertile ground for them than ever before. Of special concern is the growing centralization of political power. Government and supranational institutions increasingly intrude into citizens' daily lives. Transnational bodies seek to impose a global order, and the explosive growth of digital technologies is opening the door to new forms of totalitarian control that were unthinkable in past eras. In an age where power is concentrated in the hands of the few, and technology allows for mass surveillance, manipulation, and suppression, psychopaths gain unprecedented opportunities to pursue their ambitions. With their lust for dominance, pathological charisma, mastery of deception, and total lack of empathy, they are highly competitive in a world where morality is no longer a limiting factor. It's not hard to imagine that some psychopaths have already climbed to the top of politics, business, and government. And if the trend continues, we may face the grim scenario outlined by Polish psychiatrist Andrzej Łobaczewski in his book Political Ponerology, a scenario where psychopathy is no longer an individual anomaly, but the organizing principle of power itself. Łobaczewski coined a term for this: pathocracy, a system of government in which a pathological minority dominates and subjugates a population of psychologically healthy individuals. He wrote, "I use the term pathocracy to describe a political system in which power is seized by a small group of people with severe psychological disorders. Chief among them, psychopathy. If a person in high political office is a psychopath, they can trigger a psychopathological outbreak, infecting even non-psychopaths by drawing them into mechanisms of manipulation, repression, and moral corruption. Under pathocracy, no aspect of life, economy, culture, science, or governance can function normally. Society becomes paralyzed from within. If humanity fails to recognize the scale of the threat posed by this predatory class in time, pathocracy will no longer be a theoretical warning. It will become our political reality. In a society obsessed with appearances, the psychopath thrives. Our culture rewards confidence, assertiveness, and charm, traits easily mimicked by those who lack a conscience. The psychopath doesn't need to become a good person. They only need to play the role better than the rest of us. We live in a world where charisma often counts more than character, and visibility more than virtue. In such an environment, the predator is not only tolerated, they're elevated. What makes this especially dangerous is that the psychopath has no internal brakes. They do not self-reflect, they do not feel shame, and they are not burdened by regret. They are not tormented by the pain they cause, because to them, pain is not real unless it happens to them. Their emotional world is a vacuum, and into that vacuum rushes ambition, domination, and sadistic delight. It's important to understand, a psychopath doesn't just hurt people to survive. Many enjoy it. The pain of others is not a tragedy, it's entertainment. Control is not just a means, it's the goal. And yet, many of them will never lift a hand in physical violence. Why would they? Emotional destruction is far more effective. It doesn't leave bruises. It doesn't raise suspicion. It leaves the victim doubting their own sanity, blaming themselves while the predator walks away clean. This is why gaslighting, a psychological tactic where the victim is made to question their memory, perception, or judgment, is so commonly used by psychopaths. It's not just a tool, it's a strategy of slow, calculated annihilation. The truth is, psychopaths don't just wear masks, they are the mask. There is no real person behind the facade. What you see is a projection, an avatar tailored to your desires, your hopes, your blind spots. And once that mask no longer serves a purpose, it is discarded, along with you. That's why the aftermath of a relationship with a psychopath is often described not as a breakup, but as a psychological collapse. Victims are left with anxiety, depression, and in some cases, an existential crisis. They question everything, especially themselves. You may ask, how do these individuals rise to power so easily? The answer is unsettling, because they are not burdened by the same rules as the rest of us. While you hesitate, they strike. While you deliberate, they dominate. They study human weakness with the cold precision of a scientist. Your empathy is their leverage. Your kindness, a vulnerability. Your forgiveness, an opportunity. It's tempting to imagine that intelligence or education protects against such predators. But studies show the opposite. Smart people are often more easily manipulated because they believe they're too smart to be fooled. And so, the psychopath thrives not in darkness, but in plain sight, surrounded by enablers, admirers, and those too afraid to call evil by its name. We must stop assuming that evil announces itself with horns and fire. In the modern world, evil wears a smile. It shakes your hand. It flatters you. It networks. Evil is not always loud. Sometimes it's perfectly polite. The rise of psychopathy in leadership is not just a psychological issue, it's a civilizational one. A culture that rewards ruthlessness will eventually be ruled by the ruthless, and a society that refuses to see this truth will suffer the consequences. History has shown us what happens when pathological individuals seize control. They do not govern, they conquer. They do not serve the people, they exploit them. And when the system bends to their will, the damage is not measured in scandals or crimes, but in generations of human suffering. If we are to preserve any hope for the future, we must develop what Martha Stout calls the gift of fear. Not paranoia, but discernment. Not cynicism, but clarity. We must stop explaining away cruelty as misunderstanding, stop rationalizing manipulation as ambition, and stop mistaking charm for character, because the psychopath will not stop. They cannot be healed, they cannot be reached, but they can be recognized, and when they are, they lose their greatest weapon, invisibility. Evil thrives when good people look away, but it shrinks when even one person sees it and refuses to be fooled. If you like the video, subscribe to the Eternal Wisdom channel and our Telegram channel. Thanks for watching.